Kim, what makes you tick? Welcome back. How have you been?
I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, good, good, good. As I said to you just before we started recording, trying to figure out the sleep world after my wife had an 8-week-old baby or a baby 8 weeks ago. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Yeah, listen, great to have you back on board. We were just chatting. It was about 4.5 years ago when you were last came on. So anybody who wanted to kind of get an insight into this amazing human being, Kim Skildum-Reid, who's the guru of sponsorship around the world and been one of the most sought after people when it comes to telling how it is with sponsorship and making brands and people think about the fan first as opposed to thinking about it being a fantastic branding exposure or experience. We spoke in episode number 7 of this whole journey that I created 4.5 years ago. And it's great to have you back on board.
Oh, thanks.
So I would love to chat to you about sponsorship over the last 4 years has most likely, well, what I've seen, the landscape has changed drastically, right? We've been hit with a pandemic, so people have had to adapt and adjust, and brands have had to adapt and adjust. And now we have kind of come through the pandemic, but there's still probably a little bit of lag in how we do things. What have you seen or noticed in terms of the biggest challenges or changes in the last 4 years and how businesses have kind of coped with the adjustments?
In terms of the impact of the pandemic, I mean, it actually precipitated a number of changes, and they sort of came through at varying degrees. With different sponsors took up more or less of them, but one of the really big things was that there ended up being a really intensive focus on remote fans. So people that don't rock up at events, because during COVID, we had no events. I mean, there were, events with nobody in the stands. And so even though sponsors should have been leveraging to those remote fans, the people that care, that pay attention, that love what you're sponsoring, and um, even though they should have, a lot of sponsors didn't. They concentrated on, the people at the stadium or the people in an arena or the people at a festival instead of the whole complement of leverageable fans. And so during COVID, that was all there was remote fans. And so all of a sudden, sponsors started doing some really interesting, really scrappy things, very timely, sort of lower production value, but more timely and sort of rolling out more stuff more often. And that really worked well to keep the sponsors engaged with those fans that they'd invested in over years. And so the smartest sponsors have continued to have a really robust relationship with remote fans. Like, now you know how to do it. You figured all that out. Now there are people in the stadiums, and it's not time to go kind of, whew, glad that's over. Let's go back to the stadiums and ignore those remote fans. Now they've actually seen how valuable they can be to the brand. So that's like my favorite thing that came out after the pandemic.
Do you think
Um,
do you
sorry.
think they've kept like so are they are you seeing businesses continue with that mindset, or are you seeing them fall back into the old ways?
Both,
Okay.
both. There are a lot of sponsors, the smart sponsors are continuing to really leverage to those remote fans. I mean, you think about the fan base of Manchester United is reported to be like 1.1 billion people with a B. And it's like most of those people will never see it live, like never see it in person ever, ever, ever. And yet, for the right sponsor and the right leverage ideas, that could be amazingly impactful worldwide to just actually make an overt effort to leverage to all those people. Do you see what I'm
I
saying?
do, yeah, and like it's we spoke about it before. Is like you could come up with this amazing activation in stadium, right? And you
Yep.
literally only have 1,000 people, maybe 100, a couple of hundred people walk past and be able to participate in it. Whereas, what about the
Right.
85,000 people who are sitting in the stadium? What are you doing to actually help
And what
improve
are you
their
doing for the
experience?
million that love this club or whatever is playing in the stadium? What about them? So
Yeah,
So
there's
it's a drop in the bucket even of just the people at the stadium, and then there's all these other people.
Yeah, so it is quite interesting. I thought when during COVID there was a lot of these kind of gimmicky kind of games and apps that were kind of created to try and give people reason to interact. We saw a lot of live voting in between kind of ad breaks and stuff to try and get people on board, and it was sponsored by certain brands. You see less of that now, but I would like to think that those people who own the sponsors that actually own the relationship and that own the data that comes from it are able to to this isn't a branding exercise anymore, that it is
Right.
actually showing really meaningful connections with people, and in doing so elevating your business and product and all that stuff in the
Of course.
long run. Do you see do you see the do you see with so much money coming into the world of sport from Saudi Arabia, and with the amount of money that's going into the likes of Live Golf and the controversy that was going in there and where the money is coming from, what's your
Yep.
take on that very aggressive approach to, let's just either create our own or take over, from the Saudi side of things? What's your take on their impact now in the world of sponsorship?
Oh, look, I mean, there's
Straight off the bat there, Kim, now, just boom, straight in there.
yeah, it is. Look, the money coming out of the Middle East into sponsorship and into event ownership and development is extraordinary. And it's sort of like, I mean, it used to be America sort of led the way with these big, bold investments. And then, there was a lot coming out of Asia for a while, and now it's really concentrated a lot in the Middle East and particularly with Saudi. And look, I'm as most people do. I mean, I have my personal opinions about about how good and how appropriate that is. And I can make a good case either way. But it is really interesting because what I have seen out of Saudi and a lot of the Middle East, frankly, is that there's just enormous amounts of money being poured in, and it's being used really poorly. Like it's just not being leveraged at all. And it's sort of like, I look toward the Middle East. There's giant brands with portfolios that I would like give my eye teeth to have my hands on, because they have so much potential and they're not even scratching the surface of it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would love to
Yeah, so
to get my hands on some of those portfolios.
you can imagine with that amount of money behind you in terms of what you could do with sponsorship and how effective you could be if it was done properly. Whereas it seems to be it's just throwing mud at the wall and
Correct.
let's see what sticks. And then if it doesn't stick, sure, let's throw a few more quid at it anyway and see if we can get more people. It's just
Yeah,
there
it
doesn't seem to
doesn't.
be a huge amount of tact or strategic thinking when it comes
No.
to this.
And I don't know. I don't know how much rigor is going into the decisions on what to sponsor or what to create, but they seem to have created and sponsored some really valuable, really impactful properties and created some stuff that's, popular with some people. And it's just the idealist in me is sort of like, it hurts to see it done so
Yeah,
poorly.
yeah.
To have such valuable, amazing properties with so many fans, then so many people that could be impacted, and they're just not doing it.
Yeah, it's like Riyadh season, the boxing season that's kicked off has I think it's genuinely changed the way people see boxing now. The way they've done things between two different promoters, putting their fighters against each other. You've seen Joshua against Ngannou, and see Fury against what's his name? Jesus, I can't even think of his name. But anyway, and I wouldn't mind. He's the world champion. He's the best in the world. But there seems to be getting more eyeballs on it. So broadcast rights seem to be no problem at all. It's just the actual. It's the
driving the brand with it,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and
It's
whether
more
that brand is a brand, is a commercial brand, or whether it is a like tourism brand, like that's just
actually
not
speaking of tourism brands. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but the Aer Lingus, which is obviously huge aviation company and airline here in Ireland,
of course.
they announced their flight to Vegas, right? And but
Yep.
in doing so, they took over the Sphere, completely took over the Sphere, and
Oh, wow.
their advertisement was very much it was a pilot saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to announce that we are now flying directly to Las Vegas and buckle up because you enjoy the ride," type of thing. And the Sphere, then you could see it, and it was Aer Lingus branded completely. Really lovely shots of people like as if you were flying. And then they had a big occasion where they brought all these celebrities and stuff over. Now, I think as an announcement, I think it's a really it's really impressive, right? But like
Yep.
versus so the announcement is impressive, and a lot of people in Ireland have seen it. I don't know around the world, but is it a gimmick? Like the way you have those portals being put up around the world where you can see from one city to the next. Like it's one and done. Like is that it? You know?
Yeah, I
Is that a
mean,
good use of
that
budget,
is a
basically?
that is a is it like that would have been a very, very expensive
Yeah,
launch. And
yeah,
and yeah, I mean, it would have been a very expensive launch, and it would have been very splashy. Hopefully, they've done the sums.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, publicity stunts can work, but they don't tend to have a lot of longevity in terms of the marketing impact. So, so now people in Ireland would know that they fly to Vegas, and now they have another option. So, but it's not like they didn't have other options
I know, yeah.
before.
Like it's kind of is it a 7 day wonder and then all of a sudden back to normal, you know? Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I do think that the balance between doing a stunt, I know that's not necessarily sponsorship, right? But they did have
Yeah.
to take over the Sphere and they did have to kind of create that there's a balance of having both. What do you think? What do you think have people kind of have you seen it with consumers? Have they actually evolved in how they engage with sponsors now over the last couple of years?
Look, there's a recent poll. Oh, I've got it. It's in my it's in my new book, and I think it might be Ipsos, but I'm not entirely sure. That basically said that over 60% of consumers in America they want to use brands that align with
Their values and
with
stuff.
who they are and their values, basically. And so there is this big shift in higher expectations going on sponsors, and particularly for millennials and younger, that they actually want to work with brands and be loyal to brands and advocate for brands that don't just have good products but actually align with their values as well and are open and transparent about what their values are. It's sort of like there's less interest, especially from those younger consumers, in dealing with kind of bland Switzerland type brands that don't stand for anything. Now, that doesn't mean they have to stand for something controversial, but it's just, if it's kind of like, here's our product and it's great, but the rest of our company, nothing to see here, isn't as appealing as it used to be.
Yeah, I see that with influencer marketing as well, especially
Yep.
those who are coming on board. Is that like, do they align with the values? Not picking them just because they've got so many followers and so many views. It's like,
Right.
who are they? Are they a good person? Do they stand with what the brand stands for? Because then that lasts way longer, and it means then that when they talk about it, or they when they speak about the brand, they're doing in a real credible way. And I think when you do
Yeah.
that
I
with
mean,
sponsorship as well, you can
isn't
really,
sponsorship, it's about demonstrating what your brand is about, demonstrating what you stand for, and really building an alignment, which is which will stand the test of time.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I've been using in sort of my training stuff these days, like a dial. And if you're imagining that you're wanting to move the dial and you're pushing toward the very end, the very tip of the dial, and sort of imagine that that's focusing on awareness and sales, right?
Yeah.
So that is like, focusing on the very tip of the dial, and you push on that, focusing on awareness and sales with your sponsorship. And if you push an inch, it's going to move an inch, right?
Yeah.
But now it's gotten to where the real power is in alignment and advocacy. And if you can get people to align with a brand and advocate for the brand, all the sales are going to come. The sales will come, but so it's like pushing on that dial toward the fulcrum. So if you push it an inch, it's moving like many inches at the end. You see what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. And sorry, go ahead, keep going.
Oh no, so that's a really interesting thing is that sponsors that have just said, okay, fair enough, we're sponsoring things that people really care about. So why don't we embrace that and use that to demonstrate who we are and really build that alignment and really build in leverage that creates a lot of not just engagement, but advocacy. And then, because if we've got that, everything else, all those other things that we're trying to measure, every other KPI is going to come if we get that.
Tell me, how do you help those who are involved in leading the sponsorship charge within organizations? How do you help them convince those who haven't a clue?
Oftentimes, I mean, when I work and when I consult with an organization, there's certainly an element of first off, I interview bloody everybody before I start a strategy. So, anybody that could have it could have any impact. I interview HR, and I interview, the social team, and I interview senior executives and frontline sponsorship people. And I mean, like, it can be dozens, it can be over 100 people sometimes on really
Wow.
big jobs. So I get them all bought in, like, so they feel like they're heard, because a lot of people just don't feel like they're heard on sponsorship at all. And then once I've written the strategy, there's usually a big component of education, and there's some like heavier education for the frontline people, so the brand people, the sponsorship people. But there's also generally some kind of crash course education for the broader stakeholders. Like, they don't need to know how to make sponsorship run, but if they understand how it works, they can understand how each of those various stakeholders can leverage it within their own channels. And it also includes, frankly, some education of senior executives. I often do like 45-minute presentations to an executive committee, for instance, just to say, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. So just please back off and let everybody do their jobs, pretty much.
And you know what? When people who are from outside the organization say that, they respect that, I think, a little bit more
Correct.
than those who are in, because those who are in the organizations can find that their voice is diluted, or there's a
Correct.
misconception or preconception about them that they can't seem to get around.
Yeah, I mean, so being an outsider with that objectivity can be really helpful. Frankly, in my experience, having been reasonably high profile and writing a bunch of bestsellers for the industry and things like that, that helps, because they're like, oh, she's written this book and that book, and has spoken all over the world and all this, so she must know what she's doing. And it's like, I'm not the only one that knows what I'm doing. You have people that know what they're doing in this organization. But if you're going to listen to me, then I will help you out here.
Yeah, yeah. And so listen, let's actually just touch on that a little bit, because you have written multiple bestsellers within the industry,
Correct.
right? Let's talk about your next project.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I wasn't meaning to do that.
Well,
Sure.
I'll be the facilitator. I'll just go where the conversation goes, and I'll help you get there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So My second bestseller, which is the bestseller for sponsors, the Corporate Sponsorship Toolkit, really needed a refresh. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with the older one, but so I've just finished the second edition of the Corporate Sponsorship Toolkit. It's been edited. It is about to go out to layout. It should be out and available early 2025. And literally in the next couple of weeks, I'm starting on the fifth edition of my #1 bestseller, the Sponsorship Seekers Toolkit, which is for rights holders. And so that has been a bit of an epic. It's like, this one that I've just finished is 105,000 words long, and bloody hell, oh my God, it is hard to write 105,000 words. I mean, it doesn't get any easier when it's your 8th book, which this is my 8th book.
On top of your day job.
Yeah, oh my God. So, I mean, I had to slog through well over 1,000 case studies that had already been sort of semi-pre-vetted to find 400 that actually represented best practice. And then I had to sift through those to decide which ones I'm going to put in which book. So yeah, it's, and what case studies galore.
What are the new key kind of pointers that you're incorporating into the new books that might necessarily been in the last ones?
Well, look, I mean, the previous book came out in 2012. Okay. So
lots happened since then.
The bones of best practice sponsorship are the same, and they have been the same. But like what sponsorship looks like and some of the really cool, edgy stuff, the disruptive stuff, that's all stuff that is new. Certainly, there's a lot there on emerging technology and all of that, which is, I mean, that is a really problematic area for a lot of sponsors right now. And then a huge refresh on, so I've developed a lot more checklists and tools and processes and step-by-step and stuff in the last 12 years. I've really refined and developed some new stuff. And so that's all in there as well.
Amazing. And so let's now that you've touched on technology, because that's something I really wanted to talk. I really wanted to talk to you about, because like it would have been remiss and really poor of me not to have this conversation with you, because the evolvement of artificial intelligence within the world of communication, within our world in general, right?
Yeah.
has really taken hold, especially with younger cohorts of people coming through. What are you seeing? Because for me, I think, listen, technology, there's a benefit, right? I just don't think that there's a way to use it that'll help you within your achieve whatever you need to achieve. The human element of it is really important too, right? So, what are you seeing now with technology coming on board, especially with AI?
Look, I mean, there is so much amazing technology and with AI. I mean, don't ask ChatGPT about sponsorship because it's stuck in about 1993. But in terms of using AI or any emerging technology as a tool for leveraging sponsorships, I think that there is some real benefit there. But the issue that a lot of sponsors are having, that a lot of sponsors don't realize they're having, is that they're looking at, look at this new cool thing you can do with AI, and look at this new cool thing you can do with virtual reality, and look at this new cool thing you can do with this. And they think, oh, that's super cool. And they get to experience firsthand because it gets demonstrated to them because they're like VIPs with money. And then they're like, how can we use this with sponsorship, even if it doesn't actually add value to a lot of people, even if it is kind of like round peg, square hole. And so when you talk about the human element of it, for me with sponsorship, with AR and, VR and AI particularly, it's all about really having the empathy and understanding the experience of the fans, whether they're in person or whether they're remote fans, and looking at these things as an array of tools to help you to add value and demonstrate alignment. And And like that still is the most important thing, even with all the emerging U-Butte stuff that's coming out, is that um, it's I mean, it's got to be focused on the human experience when you use it. And the amount of stuff that you can now, hyper customize for people using AI and all of that is just like there's so much really customizable, amazing things like, predictive analytics and all of that kind of stuff that can be used with AI that really does add value to that experience. But just doing something for the sake of using a new cool, sort of technology tool is just, there's a lot of sponsors out there doing that.
I saw it in the mid noughties that it was all about an app. Everybody wanted an app. It was an
Yep.
app. But now obviously it's used now as part of the solution as opposed to the solution. And I think that's the key thing, really, isn't it? It's that this new
Correct.
technology should be part of your overall toolkit or your Swiss Army knife of marketing skills that you then use when you need it, rather than
Right.
trying to just put in all into one basket and then trying to think that that's the answer when in fact it's only a part of the answer.
Oh, exactly.
It's like research, right? Research is only one voice in the room, but it's not the voice in the room. So if you can take the research and then all the rest of the information that you have and apply it, it becomes then a really kind of wholesome, really kind of well thought out response or
Correct.
um
Yeah.
do you
I love all the people that are going, oh, we're doing data-driven marketing. It's like, that's great, but these are humans and you're sponsoring something that they care about, that they really love. So exactly how is the data going to help you with that? I mean, it is a component,
yeah,
but it's not the whole thing.
it's
I mean, you're talking about, meaning and love and passion and all that kind of stuff.
and
Data's
one
only
of
going to get you so far.
That's it. And like this, and what about like sport is one of the things that brings that all out, and sponsoring things brings that all out in like buckets. And
Yeah.
you can't predict that. It's either there or it's not, right?
Yep.
Um, do you do you think with the like with there's an appetite now for people to get into kind of sponsorship or into PR or into like that's always been there, right? But with the new generation coming through, I always was told, right, and I never believed it. We had this guy come into one of the creative agencies that I worked in, and he said, and he was one of the gurus, right? He was one of the guys that everybody thought that was the best in the business. But I was a bit skeptical, and he said that if you're under 30, and I was 28 at the time or 26 at the time, he says, if you're under 30, he says, keep your mouth shut and learn from everybody else. Right.
Oh,
So straight
oh,
away,
dearie
my hand
me.
goes up, my hand went up, and I was like, well, I'm actually 28, and I have a question about this. What's your thought on this? And there was something that was emerging that it was a bit new.
Yeah.
My whole approach ever since then has always been it's not necessarily about your age. Yeah, you can learn loads of stuff, but it's very much about your experience and what you've grown up with and what's become kind of normal to you. Would you embrace a broad spectrum of people and their age brackets when it comes to you answering various or responding to different challenges when it comes to sponsorship?
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. I mean, look, I when I work with sponsors to come up with ideas around a sponsorship, for instance, I try to get a whole bunch of people in the room so we have a brains trust, and I don't really care if all of them have degrees. I don't have a degree, so like, screw it, you know? So
That's okay.
I studied physics for God's sake.
Yeah, and like that's the thing is that your life experience is so different to what you would have experienced. Like your life experience adds so much more value to you than
Yeah,
you can realize. So people need to play on that.
exactly. And so what I try to do is we start out doing all this backgrounding stuff, like really understanding the fan experience, really understanding all the bits and bobs, all your raw materials. What benefits do you have? What channels do you have? What channels do you use? What channels do they use? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we just take off all of the constraints and we go through a directed brainstorm. And if you have everybody in the room is, some senior marketer you know, doesn't swipe left and they're not on TikTok and all this kind of stuff. I mean, their experience of the world and pop culture and how it's lived out there is very limited. So that's why you need to get a whole bunch of people from, different areas. And if they say, oh, well, they're going to have 5 people in the room, I'm going, we need more than that. Get the receptionist, get somebody else.
Well, with those
we
people
don't
that
need
do come through.
experts. We just need people that have opinions and live out there in the world.
So with those people that are coming through, what kind of a clear advice would you give them? There's the baby in the background. What kind of advice would you give them as they're kind of starting off in their career? Like what kind of thing would you say to them is that, listen, this is what you should, or here's something that I would have taken into my career if I'd known.
Look, if somebody is coming out of university or is coming to the end of university is like, I really want to get into sponsorship, I don't blame them. This is an awesome industry. Like, it's really great and it's so much fun and you get to do amazing things. And I don't blame you. But most universities, and I'm not going to say all universities, but most universities don't give you a good understanding of what best practice is and how sponsorship actually works. There are a lot of universities that still make sponsorship a 1-week module under public relations, which is then under marketing. And it's like, public relations and sponsorship can work together, but they're not one's not a subset of the other one. So I would suggest that they actually really proactively seek out best practice information. Read white papers, listen to podcasts like yours, read, recent books by people that know what they're doing. Go do some training or some online training or something that is actually going to let the light bulb go off. Because you're going to come out of university with a whole bunch of skills that will be useful. But if you have the wrong mindset, a mindset that's stuck in 1997, which a lot of universities are still teaching that crap, then you're not going to be useful in a sponsorship job. So you definitely need to augment what you've learned.
I think that's so important. I do also think that there's having your website, Power Sponsorship, has so many tools for people, right?
Yeah.
And so many people have leveraged it, right? But unfortunately, and what I've seen in the last since we spoke, some people a bit too much, right? And
I've had a bit of plagiarism happening. So yeah, that's happened. Yeah.
And and that's like for one way, copying somebody is a huge compliment, right? But it's a lazy approach of doing things. How do you manage that now? Like, how do you take that on board and like, how do you stop that from potentially happening?
Well, I mean, it makes me furious, and I do a lot of routine copyright checks. And most people that breach my copyright, have like republished a couple of my blogs and then said this came from Kim Skildum-Reid at Power Sponsorship. And because they think they put my name on it, that it's okay to do that without my permission, which it's not. And so mostly it's sort of like giving somebody a smack and saying, that's not allowed. You can't do that. Take it down now. But every so often you find somebody that, like I had somebody a few years back that literally copied my entire blog onto his blog, my whole blog. Like, so that was interesting.
But am I right in saying that not only people copied your whole blog, but people took some of your points and applied it into their own lectures and their own slides and everything.
That's right. Yep.
So people out there listening, if you're copying people, you're going to get caught.
Yeah, you don't want to piss me off.
Well, and true, because I presume you're still boxing.
Oh yeah, yep. I still box. Yes, I certainly do.
Yeah. No messing. Although don't let the smile fool you, people. No, I do think it's such a shame that happened, but it's great that you caught them because it does ward off others from potentially doing it, not only to you, but to other industries and other people
Yeah,
as
I
well?
mean, there are some people that are making, that are doing some really good content in this industry. Certainly, so I mean, my website is completely designed to be a resource for the industry, but there are other people doing really amazing blogs and white papers and stuff. There are some really good things out there, and I don't want any of us to get ripped off. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly avail yourself of the free information that's out there to do better at your job and to get more inspiration, but don't steal stuff, man. That's just terrible.
So when it comes to sponsorship, then what are your kind of your top three tips when it comes to somebody starting out and building their own sponsorship strategy?
From the corporate side, are you talking?
Yeah, okay, let's go corporate and then let's go rights holders then.
Okay. So from the corporate side, I would say that that it's really important, first off, to get the right mindset, and that will include things like don't sponsor the property, sponsor the fans, which is something that I say a lot to corporations, and that actually, by taking that on board, it really changes the entire way that they do sponsorship. But hand in hand with that is to understand that brand needs in the sponsorship equation come third, because you need to meet target market needs first. Because if you go barreling into an event, a sporting event, or a festival or a museum or whatever, and you're obnoxious and horrible and overbearing, and diminish the fan experience, nobody's going to help you get your brand needs met. And so brand needs are third behind target market needs and internal sell-in. So because you're not going to be able to do sponsorship cost effectively unless you have a whole bunch of other stakeholders that are saying, yeah, that's a great idea, I can use it through these channels of mine.
Mhm.
So that's a really, really important thing. The other thing is that I would say you need to do at least a draft leverage brainstorm exercise before you commit to anything. Because if you leverage something, if you're like looking at sort of horse races or something like that, and you're thinking, let's do this big, cup day. Okay, what could we do with it? And then you have this big brainstorm with lots of angles and all that. You come up with a ton of ideas. You winnow them down to your favorites. You're going to negotiate for completely different benefits if you know what you're going to do with it than if you just go in and sort of take some version of the package that they've offered you and then try to figure out how to use the benefits you've got.
Yeah.
So leverage and before you make a decision, because what you want is those stakeholders in the room. So that will also help you to do that internal sell-in and understand if they're bought in or not. I mean, if you're the only one in that room that's excited about something, you just don't do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like,
That's
you could
really
be
good.
right. It could be amazing, but if nobody else sees that, it's going to be underdone and expensive to leverage.
Yeah.
And the last thing is really learn how to measure properly. Learn how to measure properly. And you've got so many experts in your own company that can measure sponsorship off of their own benchmarks on, KPIs that they own and that your organization has already decided, has weight and importance to you. And so, measure really, measure in a really holistic way and understand that you cannot meat grinder a whole bunch of mechanisms and stuff through, and end up with some kind of ratio of dollars to dollars, because it just doesn't work. Almost everything in that is going to be arbitrary. Half of it's going to be mechanisms, not outcomes. So just understand that your measurement report is going to be multifaceted. There's going to be a lot of people involved in it, and that it will actually show a accurate picture of what you've accomplished at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's really important, isn't it? Like linking sponsorship objectives should never be different really to what the business objectives are. They should complement.
Right. But there is no such thing as sponsorship objectives. It should be always a subset of the overall business objectives and marketing objectives.
Exactly, yeah. I've seen too often, in even the world that I'm in, and the world of sponsorship as well. I've seen too often where they say, "Here's our objectives," and they see sponsorship as a kind of like a lone ship in the night.
Yeah, so like the poor cousin.
Yeah, that has its own approach, you know. So that's on the corporate side, and then on the other side,
Oh, geez. I mean, there's rights holders right now
sorry, we probably need
are
another
often
podcast for
so
this, Kim.
sorry.
We probably need another podcast for this.
Oh,
Go
right.
on,
Rights holders
sorry.
right now are really a long way behind
Yeah,
behind sponsors. And I mean, sponsors, some are great and some are really not great, but rights holders are generally speaking behind, behind in terms of sophistication. So, most rights holder organizations have been selling in virtually the same way for 20 or more years. And so, it's like,
what's that
here's
way?
our pack. Oh, here's our packages. It's gold, silver, bronze, or some derivative of that with maybe minor amounts of customization for specific sponsors. They don't encourage sponsors to get really creative with leverage, most of them. They don't give them any leverage ideas. I mean, that's the number one thing that a rights holder could do to get a sponsor on board is actually to use their understanding of the fan experience and why the fans care. What are the meaning points for the fans and the various segments of the fans and what drives them? And then come up with ideas that are exclusive to that sponsor and will push all the buttons of the key target markets for that sponsor. So come up with those leverage ideas. And that is like the number one thing that rights holders can do. And I probably, you maybe asked the same question last time. I probably would have answered it exactly the same way because it's still the biggest problem is that rights holders commoditize themselves. They just talk about how great they are, and then they do some really lame ass, sort of commodity benefits in a, some kind of an arrangement that approximates gold, silver, bronze, and then a price, and that's it. And when sponsors are looking at dozens or hundreds, or for some sponsors, thousands of proposals a month, I mean, how long do you think they're going to be thinking about, ooh, this looks good. I wonder what we could do with this. That's
Yeah.
not long, man.
Do you think that is, do you think it is, do you think that's because they're so much in need of money to keep certain things going, or to compete, or to, like, are they being driven by the wrong factors rather than
Look,
like,
I don't care if they need money. That's fine. That's fair enough. I mean, that's, it's going to go into the pot. But what I'm saying is that sending out 400 proposals that are basically search and replace proposals that have absolutely no idea. There's nothing clear about, where their alignments with the brands that are going to build alignment with fans. And there's nothing in there like that. I mean, that's an enormous amount of effort to send out 400 proposals and then do all the follow up and all of this kind of stuff for probably zero results. Or if they get a result, it's going to be the very, very lowest possible amount, rather than sending out 20 or 25 highly customized proposals with really, really good ideas in them, and which will take you less time, less follow up, and have a much higher strike rate.
I
And
think
so
you,
it's
I think
like, reallocate your work.
I think you're dead right, because while they mightn't have, say, a sponsor mightn't necessarily have it in the budget for that year or that moment, but at least you're on the consideration list for the next time, because you're going,
Correct.
hold
I
on,
mean,
guys, let's
if you do
actually
it right, a sponsor is always going to invite you back,
let's talk
even if
about
they
that
can't
now
say
in
yes this
the next financial year, and actually see if we can figure something out there. Yeah, I think you're dead right, and then you're working smarter, not
correct.
harder, right? So
So
we
yeah, then a no isn't a no, go away, you've wasted my time, I never want to see you again. It's like I can't do it this time, but this is actually really good. Can we talk about this again next year?
yeah,
Or you have another event coming up, let's talk about that instead.
yeah.
So yeah.
I love it. I think it's lovely to catch up with you after all this time, because you're still so steadfast in how to position the world of sponsorship in both the corporate and the rights holders, right?
Steadfast. I like that. Most people call me bullheaded.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that was my corporate speak. But like it's so refreshing to hear, and it's so good to hear how energized you are about the topic still. You know, like you've
I just
turned
love this.
you've turned something that you love into an unbelievable business. And you can see that energy is still coming through. Like you're still traveling the world. You're still getting
Yep.
to see places that you probably had never been before. And you're getting to meet all these human beings that are only dying to hear what you have to say about a topic that you clearly love and are passionate about. Um, I am so happy that you had the time to speak with me. We've been trying this for a while, but I finally got there. And I really, really wish you the best of luck with the new book. I'll be purchasing that for sure. And when it does
Oh,
come out,
thanks.
I'll put it up on the show notes and stuff.
I'll let you
But
know as soon as it's available. And
yeah,
you have fun with the new Bob.
I know. Yeah, fun times. He's there in the background now, asleep while my wife has gone to the gym. So yeah, tag team and things at the moment, which is great. But yeah, no,
Fair
thank
enough.
you so much, Kim. Really appreciate it, and thanks as well for sharing all the really interesting and important work that you're doing. Because for me, as a kind of like a follower and watching you on LinkedIn, it's always great because it does uh, kind of ignite different ideas that I have in the world that I'm working in as well. So yeah, really, really
Cool. Well,
appreciate all the stuff that you're doing.
I'm spending the next couple of weeks writing a bunch of blogs before I start writing another bloody book because that just sucks all the words out of you, man.
Well, good luck with it all, and thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Cheers.